I think Valve might be the best multi-billion-dollar company in gaming history. Now I know what you're thinking. Way to defend the multi-billion-dollar company, Couch Co-op. And I don't blame you for going there. The gaming industry has been infected with a corporate rot that seems to eventually ruin every inspired property that it can. That's not to say we haven't had some truly phenomenal single-player games this year. Clair Obscur, Hades 2, Ghost of Yotei, Helldivers 2 had a great year, Arc Raiders and Battlefield 6 came out, but we've also had our fair share of gaming corporations corporating it up. Microsoft's handling of the Xbox has been a complete disaster with the recent Game Pass price hike, and no clear path forward for new hardware. Nobody has any idea what's going on with the impact of US tariffs on the gaming industry as a whole. The CEO of Ubisoft got subpoenaed, and all of this begs the question, what has Valve been up to? Well, while Mr. Zuckerberg was trying to forcibly integrate all humans into a gaming laptop, Valve made an announcement that put Apple and Meta on the back foot, and they haven't put out a new game in 5 years? I guess, does Deadlock count as a new game? It's not really out yet. How does Gaben keep getting away with it? How does this company manage to do everything its competitors want to do without being universally hated? From hardware to games, nobody is doing it quite like Valve. How did Valve get to where it is today? And is this entire video just going to be a Valve glaze session? Kind of. This is the story of Valve Software. Most people know of Valve as the company that developed Steam, refined Counter-Strike and Dota, made Portal, Left 4 Dead, Team Fortress, and of course Half-Life. They're also known as a studio that never counts to 3. But before people knew of Valve, there was the company that the Valve guys, well, the first Valve guys anyway, were working at. It was a small company you may have heard of called Microsoft. Now there's an intense sort of irony in the origins of Valve Software. Anybody who's spent more than a couple of seconds online in the gaming space has obviously heard the name Gabe Newell. What most people probably don't know is that he was formerly an employee of Microsoft almost 30 years ago. The year was 1996, and the internet, as you and I know, didn't really exist yet. It was in its burgeoning stages. Bill Gates, the man himself, had just sent a memorandum to Microsoft executives warning them of the pressing importance to get in on this whole World Wide Web thing while the getting was hot.
There's a lot of people who are forecasting that there'll be software stores just like there are record stores today, and that there'll be thousands and thousands of those. And I think I'd have to agree with that.
And our buddy Gabe had just started this new company, Valve, with his buddy Mike Harrington. In his own words, on the surface, we should have failed. So this was a gamble no way you sliced it. To go their own way before the creation of Windows 98 was something in and of itself. But they did. Over time, they developed a game called Half-Life, and it did something tremendously impactful, both for them and the gaming world as we know it. Half-Life was a shooter game, but it wasn't like other shooter games. You went here, you shot bad guys, you went there and you shot bad guys. You know, that was pretty standard fare. That was fine. It wasn't like Half-Life wasn't on rails. In fact, the very opening sequence of the game was definitionally on a rail. But the guys at Valve said we want to do something more exciting. They wanted to make an immersive narrative, not just a shooting gallery. And one of the ways that they accomplished this was by omitting cutscenes entirely. They also had the characters turn and talk to you like real people and react to your antics in realistic ways as well.
That's odd. My God, what are you doing?
Hey, what the hell are you doing down here? Get topside! I hear troops are coming in to save us. Yeah, we might stand a better chance if we team up. You go on without me.
So in 1998, Valve's approach to Half-Life ended up setting the stage for the single-player narrative shooter. And with it, they changed gaming pretty much forever. Half-Life starts out with this iconic train sequence where the player character commutes to work. On your commute, you see the environments of the Black Mesa Research Facility in a nondescript part of New Mexico. The sequence sets the stage by taking the place of a traditional cinematic where the player sits and watches something like a short film to establish context for the game world. Here, the player gets that experience while interfacing with the game itself. Gordon Freeman can walk around the train and observe the facility as it travels deeper towards the center of the facility. And when you get off the train, it's like going to work. NPCs drop quips about how you're running late, how so-and-so needed you here to get to this and that ASAP, or that they already told who's it that what's it is happening over there. It's typical work yapping that feels realistic and well delivered, all things considered. You need clearance from people higher up the chain of command to get into certain rooms, and then you start to have the worst day at work possible. I won't get too into the weeds on Half-Life lore. It's an old game and worth playing. Suffice to say, the US government was experimenting with teleporting technology and accidentally opened a portal that let a bunch of killer aliens into our world. The environment falls apart and collapses in real time. Parts at the beginning of the game that were tame and clinical become obstacle courses filled with dangerous creatures. Your colleagues' bodies are abducted and morphed into abominable things with sharp claws. Half-Life did a lot for immersive storytelling in gaming. It was a genuinely well-written science fiction action story with even some cosmic horror elements sprinkled in for good measure. After battling these deadly aliens and even US Marines sent to kill you for witnessing these events that must never reach the public's eye, Gordon Freeman, the player character, is informed by the mysterious G-Man that he's been given a job offer.
I have recommended your services to my employers, and they have authorized me to offer you a job. They agree with me that you have limitless potential. You've proved yourself a decisive man, so I don't expect you'll have any trouble deciding what to do. If you're interested, just step into the portal, and I will take that as a yes. Otherwise, well, I can offer you a battle you have no chance of winning.
This weirdly human but inhuman suited fella has been watching you the whole time if you manage to notice him, and he's acting on the behalf of some unnamed employers. They've kept an eye on Gordon over the course of this no-good, horrible day. Impressed by what he's done, the G-Man gives Gordon a choice. Not exactly the nicest boss I've ever had. All of that would be part of an unbelievably good reception from critics and general audiences. Half-Life is considered one of the greatest video games ever made. It executed its objective to make an immersive, narrative gameplay experience so well that it set the standard for what you and I know today as the campaign shooter. An adventure on rails with curated missions and set pieces, with a clear Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. And then, a little game called Counter-Strike, a mod based on Half-Life, happened, so then it ended up changing the face of competitive FPS gaming as you know it too. No big deal. A few years passed, and Valve made a sequel in 2004, Half-Life 2. Over the course of these years spent, Valve had been refining the mechanical formula of Half-Life's FPS gameplay, but they also put together something really important for their company's success, and that was the Source Engine. Why should you care about the Source Engine? Well, for one, it's the engine that made Titanfall, which is kind of cool, but it also set another standard that a lot of companies had to chase to stay competitive. Source was a heavily modified version of the already modified version of the Quake engine that the first Half-Life ran on. Now, I'm not a programmer, I can't pretend to tell you what makes Source tick, like, specifically, but I can get in the ballpark. Source was really good at handling physics. Half-Life 2 took advantage of this, obviously, in the form of things like the gravity gun. You could pick up buzzsaws and blast them away at menacing headcrab zombies to cut them in half. We see these mechanics as basic and easily replicated today in 2025, but back in 2004, this was really freaking cool. Physics have to be modeled accurately in your game engine. There's millions of lines of code telling your computer to render these things in this exact same way to the correct calculations the physics engine is making. It has to do a lot of math really, really quickly and really efficiently. It's a tremendous achievement even 20 years later. The game had just a lot of fun with physics design elements that made it feel less like a game and more like a virtual world that you were participating in. Half-Life 2 still holds up graphically to this day 2 decades later. It also had great animation quality for faces. The G-Man's address to Gordon Freeman at the start of the game consists of these surreal close-up shots detailing his high-fidelity, highly intricate, and eerily realistic speaking. The G-Man's brow furls, his eyes dart back and forth, and his demeanor is conveyed the same way a real human being would, not the way a video game character would. Half-Life 2 did the same sort of less is more style of narrative that the last game did. In this iteration of the story, the evil aliens have taken over the Earth with a wide variety of different enemy types, and they have for quite some time since Gordon Freeman woke up from his nap. There are more types of evil aliens. There are humans that are working on behalf of the evil aliens. The infamous headcrab zombies from the original Half-Life return, and even more realistic and shockingly gory detail with terrifyingly realistic muffled screams. Half-Life 2 was a dark, compelling narrative experience, just like the first one. Except this time, Valve could take more advantage of their new toys. And this was a period of gaming history where we could see rapid changes in terms of the technology and what we could do. Half-Life 2, just like Half-Life before it, didn't avoid using every part of the buffalo. The art direction and the narrative were great, the mechanics were great, the gameplay was great, it was just a great game. And now, all Valve had to do was build upon what they had. Valve now had a loyal audience. Something else Valve had was modularity with their games. Modding was an essential component of game development for the Valve guys. After all, the only reason that Counter-Strike happened was because somebody made a mod of Half-Life. Half-Life 2 is the basis under which Gary's mod was created, this massive gaming sandbox. And as a result, it created the grounds necessary for Skibbity Toilet. I wish I was joking. This was the era of old YouTube, the Gmod Idiot Box, and Half-Life, Full Life Consequences. You see, for our Gen Z audience, us millennials had brain rot as well.
Pills here! Pills here! Pills here! Pills here! Grabbing pills. Grabbing pills.
Grabbing some pills. Grabbing some pills.
Pills here! Pills here! Pills here! Grabbing pills. Pills!
Grabbing some pills. Grabbing some pills.
3 years later, Valve released Portal. What can I not say about Portal? You get a portal gun, shoot once at a flat surface, then you shoot a second time somewhere else, and you'll have 2 portals, generating a window through which you can walk through, transporting you instantaneously to where the opposite portal was. The portals retain physics, so you can launch yourself through them by falling from great heights or send crates through them to knock things over. It seems like a relatively simple concept once you understand it. Fun with physics and pathing. It's much more difficult to imagine the answer to this question. How the hell did Valve make the portals? Like, what did they do? Well, they tell you, kind of.
When rendering the player's view through a portal, we must render a separate image using a virtual camera which looks out of the opposite portal. To obtain a correct image and efficient rendering performance, we render only what is visible to the limited field of view of the opposite portal and exclude objects which lie between the virtual camera and the plane of the opposite portal.
The combination of portal-destroying fields, which we call fizzlers, and the elevators, serve a dual purpose. They provide a clearly identifiable endpoint for each test chamber, while also addressing the more practical problem of how to keep players from portaling across level loads.
This snippet doesn't tell you everything, and I sure as hell don't know what it really means. If you asked me to write the code for it, I couldn't do it. But let's just use logic. So the dev here, David Kircher is his name, he describes that they use a virtual camera to present another field of vision through which the player can see. Okay, that sounds like anybody can get their head around that. But then your graphics card would have to re-render everything, right? That sounds like a lot of performance load. Kircher explains that they make sure the game only renders what is visible through the portal view. Well, how do you do that? How do you make sure that the camera perspective through the portal looks realistic in the first place? You have to adjust the point of view from which the virtual camera rests dynamically in relation to the player as well. That is just one step. There are several other math, perspective-y, geometry-y things you gotta do that I just confuse most people with. What matters is they said what they were doing on a technical level, and they didn't just say, oh, it was hard, but then we figured it out. No, they actually opened up the level of depth in terms of how they actually solved the problem. This is a level of accessibility that just doesn't come from any other game studio. Now, this is common in creative mediums to see behind the scenes sort of relationships with your audience. It's a cool relationship. It makes the art you just saw feel more real and closer to you. But at what point does too much information become privileged information? How much information are you willing to give your competition? Or is Valve so confident that they just don't care? Maybe Valve wants the competition. Maybe Valve wants people like you to study these tapes. Maybe Valve wants you to work at Valve. Well, good luck. According to a testimonial for the dev I just quoted here on LinkedIn, Valve doesn't hire junior people. I've already talked at length about Valve's engineering prowess. And again, I don't know a lot about game engineering. But what is clear about Valve is that they have fun designing their games just as much as making the artwork for them. Portal released alongside Team Fortress 2 in 2007, a simple at-face value class shooter depicting 9 unique classes with very clear strengths and weaknesses in a team fight to the death. The game's art direction is like Norman Rockwell meets Pixar meets Adult Swim. It's filled with 1950s action TV show sort of campiness, with a hint of self-awareness that I can't find executed very well these days. Valve dedicated a ton of time and effort to making short little cinematic trailers for the mercenaries of Team Fortress 2 in a sort of Pixar movie for adults kind of darkly funny way, like the clearly insane soldier dressing down a lined up platoon of dead enemies,
And from that day forward, anytime a bunch of animals are together in one place, it's called a zoo.
or the drunk Scottish Cyclops, the demo man, lamenting the fact that he's not taken seriously.
They gotta make it out. I'm a black Scottish Cyclops. They got more than they got the likes of me.
Valve has had a team of smart programmers and game designers, but they also have talented artists, and they take advantage of that. In 2008, Valve dropped Left 4 Dead, the iconic zombie co-op shooter introducing yet another cast of iconic characters. And then in 2009, they did it all over again with Left 4 Dead 2.
This used to be a nice neighborhood.
This is some grim shit we got ourselves
Our heroes feel like real people in a fight for their lives, with a little bit of spunk and tough upper lip to get them across the finish line. Then they dropped yet more peak with Portal 2 in 2011, featuring the guy who wanted pictures of Spider-Man. And then Valve kind of stopped developing games. Huh? What are you talking about? No, I'm serious. They just stopped. But there's not a lot of companies like Valve. Valve doesn't have investors meetings. They don't have a public stock price. It's just a bunch of nerds with some ideas and the desire to be left the hell alone. You can only get away with that by taking advantage of Valve's unique organizational style, and that's called the flat organizational model. In a typical company, you got your manager, and you got your boss, who's like your manager's manager. Usually at Valve, the managers supervise a large number of people, while the actual number of people in the chain of command itself is small. A manager at Valve has more responsibility than a manager at Ubisoft because the Valve guy has to manage more subordinates. But in this very same Wikipedia article that I'm not just paraphrasing for a YouTube script, it reads, and I quote, "The foremost example of a company with self-managing teams is Valve." After finishing Half-Life 2 back in 2004, Valve moved away from the hierarchical organization model you are familiar with to the open allocation system, or flat organization, that they use now. Valve has no bosses. The company is not dependent on the success of developing games. And while it definitely leads to the infamous phenomenon of Valve time, where games take 80 million years to actually end up releasing, case in point Half-Life 3 never materializing after all this time, Valve's products have all been received so well, you can't help but wonder if this approach has something to do with the quality. I'm willing to bet that it does. After all, correlation does mean causation. In all seriousness, Valve is an outlier. They aren't just one of a few gaming companies putting these concepts into practice. They're one of a few companies in the world to do it, especially with the kind of money they're making too. Gaming is a creative medium. You need your artists to have a little bit of breathing room and the ability to own their own mistakes, as well as champion their own triumphs. Valve's community-focused approach to Steam has made it the most popular place to own your PC games, to the point that other distribution services for games are seen as mere annoyances, roadblocks in the way of playing the game you want. I can't think of a single person who's excited by the Riot Games client, or Ubisoft Connect, or the EA app, but several people I know have a tricked-out Steam profile. Gabe Newell and Valve in general stand at a really important precipice for gaming and the tech world. Back in 2012, Gabe was on the record to state that Windows 8 is a catastrophe for everyone in the PC space. This was off the back end of Microsoft making more and more of a push at the time towards closed architecture. Closed architecture being the design practice of making your hardware more inaccessible to modifications, part swapping, personal repairs, etc. In my opinion, this is an anti-consumer approach that's been made infamous by companies like Apple. One of the few ways that you can get into gaming on Linux computers, though, is through, you guessed it, Steam. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I imagine for many of you, you can't play Valorant. Oh well. You have a Steam account, I think. If you're watching this video, we're a gaming channel after all. Did you know that Steam's actually been around since 2003? In fact, since 2008, Valve released the Steamworks SDK. If you don't know what that is, it's a collection of tools and documentation that allows developers to build software applications. Now, that's a level of modularity and accessibility that a lot of game developers just don't feel like providing the average person. But in Valve's case, it allows an aspiring game developer to do something as simple as allow the Steam UI into their little Unreal Engine 5 project, which is kind of neat. Community is a huge part of Valve's development ethos. It's the reason that Counter-Strike has so many unique aim training and grenade training maps designed completely by the community. Valve isn't interested in signing a deal with Kablam Esports to host their esports tournaments forever and ever and ever at the cost of executive decision-making on the presentation of the product. You can host a Valve-approved event. I think Valve has earned the right to be this confident by now, even if it took them a standard Valve year to actually start developing their new game, Deadlock. Valve's actual track record to all the giant game development companies it's competing with, and Valve's win-loss record is just not even close. They've continually managed to put out universally acclaimed products again and again and again, relatively scandal and hassle-free. Think of Call of Duty. It started out with this beloved, iconic single-player campaign style, and then that style got nuked off the face of the earth. Ubisoft. They started out with the well-regarded Assassin's Creed and Far Cry games. Now the general consensus is that Far Cry is mid, and Assassin's Creed is struggling. Valve's approach to gaming is entirely democratized. It embraces individual contribution by fans, and embraces players setting their own values of what they think their shiny AK-47 skin is worth. It embraces individual creative expression and the ability to incorporate your cool idea into Steam's architecture in a manner that you see fit. That's the reason that Valve has been making so much money. They don't need to keep making games. For the last 10 years, all they had to do was just curate the thing that they had. Valve is maintaining an open source approach to gaming that would otherwise not be here at all. While the global economy inflates the price of something as simple as a stick of RAM to upwards of $1,000, while the development of GPUs seems more and more geared towards LLMs like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, while gaming seems to become more and more of a tech product offered by a massive company, Valve is here just doing what they've always done. The people at Valve have continued to work on what they want to work on, for better or worse. And anytime they do manage to compete with a big tech giant like Meta, they end up beating them at their own game with the Valve Index, with the Steam Deck, with the Steam Frame. Valve is doing everything other companies could do, but they just don't want to, because they want to pocket as much money as possible. But in the case of Valve, it's clear that you can have your cake and eat it too. Gabe Newell is a rich man, not because he's a ruthless, cunning, conniving businessman, but because he had a good idea and he let his employees dictate how they wanted to do their jobs. America could learn a thing or two from companies like Valve, and the gaming industry, in my opinion, is better for its presence, despite its faults. And for what it's worth, they made what might be the best virtual reality game of all time with Half-Life Alyx, and Deadlock might just save gaming if they don't screw it up. What do you love or hate about Valve? Let us know in the comments. Give the video a like if you liked it, and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you in the next one. Thanks.